paradigm of absolute control. And that's why we're just out here doing simple things, pointing out that we're meant to be in nature and be natural. And this is where we find the source that God made to transcend the New World Order. And that's why they want to try to keep us out of it.
I'm angry. I've had enough of these people. They're a bunch of Christian murderers, scum. They're on giant death factories, keeping babies alive. They're selling their body parts. What more do you need to know about these people? I go out and face these scum. They literally crawl out from under rocks. They have green looking skin and they run around screaming, we love Satan, we wanna eat babies. I have them on video. Hillary's in the creepy weird sick stuff, man. She sleeps in the same room with that creepy weird woman whose mother wears a hood over her head. What the hell? That woman number one is ugly. Imagine how bad she smells, man. I'm told her and Obama just stink. Obama and Hillary both smell like sulfur. Literal vampire pot, then the goblins are hobbling round, coming after us. My spirit gets close to that evil and I feel it go. We're such self-centered crap, we don't even notice hell itself rising up against us. Millions of pointed people of the very worst type, and I'm so pissed. We're gonna stab your daughter at the mall. We're gonna stab your wife, your son. We're gonna stab you with a butcher knife, and then the police chief is gonna say, we love our Somalis, we love our Muslims. Oh, they're so good, oh, they're so sweet.
I was watching Fox News as I worked out this morning.
Whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. I said certified freak. 7 days a week. Wet ass P word. Make that pull-out game weak. Yeah, you effin' with some wet ass P word. Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet ass P word. Give me everything you've got for this wet ass P word. Beat it up, N word, catch a charge. Extra large and extra hard. Put this P word right in your face. Swipe your nose like a credit card. Hop on top if I want to ride. I do a kegel while it's inside. Spit in my mouth, look in my eyes. This P word is wet, come take a dive. It continues along these lines. And it gets significantly more vulgar. Like, a lot more vulgar.
your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat your ass. I will eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat you. I will eat your ass. I'll barbecue your ass flat. I will cook your ass up so fast, and I'll tell them, "Oh, I killed a cow out back, baby." You think Christ would eat somebody? He would never do that. I will. I'm ready to hang them up, gut them and skin them and chop them up. You know what? I'm ready. I will eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat your ass. I will eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat you. I will eat your ass. I will eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat your ass. I will eat your leftist ass like corn on the cob. I'm ready. I will eat you. I will eat your ass. And that's why I want the globalists to know. I will eat your ass first. I swear to God, if it's the last thing I do, I'm gonna get my hands around your throat.
What rolls downstairs from motor and pairs rolls over your neighbor's dog? What's great for a snack and fits on your back? It's long, long, long. It's long, long. It's big, it's heavy, it's wood. It's long, long. It's better than that, it's good. Everyone wants a long. You're gonna love it long. Come on and get your long. Everyone needs a long.
Log from Blammo.
another viewer broadcast. Let's go! Holy cow, it's a big day today. We got a crazy day, crazy show for you today. I'm not streaming at my normal hours, but that's because we got a wild show today. I'm excited for it. It's gonna be a good one. We're gonna watch Trump get arraigned, see what's going on, live updates. Let's go! So I'm excited. Hope you're excited. We got a bunch of live streams queued up. We got some Fox News. We're gonna see what we've missed. I hear the court case is just starting right now, so we're gonna hop to. I'm gonna blast off, and yeah, we're gonna watch history being made. It's gonna be a really good show. I'm excited. Let's get into it. Let's get into it, everybody. Yeah, man. All right. I'm just gonna pull up some clips. There's a couple streams that are live right now. All right, let's pop over to our first, the first thing we got cooking here. We got some commentary just for now.
Presidential candidate, and that was the precedent that was set.
I've heard you make this argument, Congresswoman.
I know, but then I see this today,
Thank you,
and it really is shocking to me.
Yes, and I wanted to drill down on that. If you read the indictment,
Sorry,
you
my
notice
computer's
that
just struggling.
it
There we
mentioned
go.
the willful retention of documents. And so the distinction that has been made in the case of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump is the willful retention of documents, as is laid out, and a question of obstruction. That the president
to indict him but not indict anybody else. Now, I think we should protect our national secrets.
I also understand, is it true that
classified information that are unsecured, but Joe Biden had classified information in his garage, unsecured, sitting next to his Corvette, and God knows where else in this country. So he should be indicted or be held
where is
to the
that
same
information
standard as
now?
Donald Trump.
And
Well, I
Congressman,
hope that it will be
what happened to that information when it was revealed?
Hopefully it's been collected by
Immediately
the government.
collected?
Right, but where is
So
he had over
once they
1,800
found out about it, they
boxes
returned
of
it.
information, including classified documents. So that's the standard. And I think Donald Trump's being treated unfairly here.
So
I
was asking you about
everything
your.
he had that's
I hear you. I was asking you about your district, though. Don't you want to talk about your
Yes.
district? I was asking you about your district.
Yes, and I answered
understand.
your question,
So, is your
which
district
was to
include
say
Joint
about
Base
half of all the
Charleston?
bases, if you'd let me speak, I said about half of all the bases in South Carolina are in the low country of South Carolina. That I represent on the House Armed Services Committee. I've said it like
And
3
how
times
important
now.
is it to
I
preserve
don't know
nuclear?
if you can hear me or not.
How important? I am having a little trouble hearing you. Sorry, Congresswoman. It is
That's
quite
what I
loud
thought.
here, so my apologies. How important is it in terms of safeguarding America's nuclear
We're off to a good
secrets?
start, Chad.
It is very important. It is of the utmost importance to protect our nation's secrets, period.
It's a good interview. She
And
really
so,
knocked it out of the park.
As was alleged, there were documents that contain America's nuclear secrets.
Nuclear
in a
secrets,
storage
everybody.
room, in a bathroom or in a ballroom. Would that concern you?
It would absolutely concern me. But again, the FBI had access to those documents, they had access to those boxes, and they had access to all those rooms as well.
Congresswoman, the FBI did not have access to those documents. There was a subpoena for those documents.
Uh-oh.
And then the attorneys
Last
for Donald
summer,
Trump
when it
said
was
that they had
reported,
given
the
all of the
FBI had
documents
access to
over, when then that was
Mar-a-Lago.
not true, and then they had to have a raid.
They had to raid him.
Last summer,
Thank you so
that
much,
it was
Congresswoman.
reported
Wow.
that the
Apologize
FBI had
about the
access
audio
to Mar-a-Lago.
issues.
They're just cutting
I'm
her.
sure.
They're just cutting her off. Yeah, I'm sure.
I apologize. We're having an audio issue, but
Ah.
Congresswoman, I thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah. Audio issue. Uh-huh. I could hear her fine.
We were getting some feedback, so I apologize on that, but I think there was some back and forth. There was some misunderstanding. She was misrepresenting what, in fact, the FBI had access to at Mar-a-Lago.
There's
And they
no
cut her off.
way she made it sound that, like, the FBI had unfettered access to those documents. Well, they didn't, and that's why there were negotiations and ultimately the subpoena.
Yeah, it was a misrepresentation, to be clear, of what the issue was. The president, the National Archives repeatedly demanded that those presidential records, government records, be turned back over. When they were not, then they said, we're going to refer this to the Department of Justice and the FBI. The referral was then made. A subpoena was then issued. Some documents were handed over. The Trump attorneys signed an affidavit that said they had turned them all over, which was inaccurate and not true, which is why then there was an additional seizure of additional classified documents.
Also, if you're looking for a similar standard to be applied, there's a special counsel looking into the facts of the case with Joe Biden. He hasn't skated. It's happening. The difference in the two cases, the differences we know because we don't have the findings of the special counsel looking into the current president, but we know the difference is that Joe Biden acted voluntarily, whereas the former president did not act voluntarily. We also know that the number of cases is far smaller than in the case with Donald Trump. And we also, nobody who talks about standards with respect to law enforcement, let's imagine for a moment that you thought Hillary Clinton was guilty. There's nobody who says that a miscarriage of justice in one case, if that's what you hold, gets somebody off in another. In other words, our mothers told us that two wrongs don't make a right. So you should enforce the standard in any given instance. And in this instance, the energy to assert a standard is missing from the conversation of the presidents, those who would defend the president. Also, there's a political standard, whether the president maintained the kind of character that you would want of a person who's asking to be given power again in the presidency.
That's my president.
What is at stake in terms of the FBI's credibility with this case and the continued assaults on the FBI's credibility?
If you come to South Florida, which I've done numerous times because I like visiting South Florida, you talk to people down here, and some of them will say the FBI has gotten beyond its charter. The FBI is out of control. And why do they say that? Because they see what is happening to former President Trump, and they don't like it. However, if you talk to law enforcement, the FBI was simply doing its job upholding the Constitution, enforcing laws. And in this case, you know, the subpoenas, the negotiations with the Trump team, that didn't happen in a matter of weeks or days. All of this was drawn out over probably a year and a half, maybe longer. Because I've talked to sources within the FBI as well as within the Department of Justice who insist that they did not want to be here this day where a former president was indicted in a case like this. They tried to appeal to the former president to turn over everything that he had, and it just wasn't happening. And that's why we are where we are today.
And just to clarify, Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty to 37 federal counts in this courthouse behind us in Miami. He is joined by several of his attorneys. He was at the table along with his valet, Walt Nauta, who is also charged. And across from them is the prosecutor special counsel, Jack Smith. Want to bring in Scott Frederickson, a former federal prosecutor. And Scott, your take on some of the arguments being made about what Donald Trump is charged with.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. First, to the Congresswoman's points. First, Jim Comey made a specific finding: no willful retention or misrepresentation by Hillary Clinton. It probably cost her the presidency, but there was no obstruction or anything alike. The irony here is that by all reports, when Chris Kise, who's standing next to President Trump in the courtroom, first was brought in full disclosure, he was a partner of mine in my firm before he left to represent President Trump. By all reports, he counseled President Trump to cooperate with the DOJ to try and get these documents back. And the fact is, it's the same standard. If he had done that, we would not be here today. Instead, it's the criminal obstruction. It's the lying. It's the false statements. It's the hiding. It's the lying to his counsel. That's why we're here today.
Scott Frederickson, thank you. And on that note then, how limited are Trump's attorneys in terms of addressing this case? What would be their best defense?
Well, the best defense here is now that you're indicted, you've got to go 1,000% with all the motions to try and knock out as much evidence as possible. Jack Smith has anticipated that. The beauty of this talking indictment is it anticipates these arguments that somehow he had them by mistake, or he didn't understand, or he could declassify. The indictment rebuts that on its face. They're going to challenge use of classified documents by the government. The government has to be careful about putting, classified documents out there, and there's a complicated procedure, the SEPA, which will govern that. So they'll go at that. So these motions, and then the first thing they'll do is they're going to make huge, burdensome demands of discovery. They're going to want everything the whole U.S. government has that has anything to do with that. That's going to develop into a huge fight, and it'll take a lot of time to work through. But right now, the best defense counsel right now are going to do all that. They also have legal arguments they're going to fashion having to do with his former status as the president, obviously the use of his attorney client, his attorney's statement. So it's going to be
sort of rare times
panoply of
where,
motion.
like, the attorneys actually had to, foster up information.
Starting with the first hearing.
Scott Friedrichsen, thank you. Want to talk about where the public is at this point, because there is new CBS News polling that shows Republicans say they are more concerned that Trump's indictment is politically motivated than his alleged conduct being a national security risk. Want to bring in our chief correspondent,
I just want you to think
Washington
it's about the nukes.
correspondent, Major Garrett. And Major, the politics of this, even as the former president will face a trial jury.
Right. Good afternoon, Nora. It's great to be with you. And let me set the scene. I'm not where you are in Miami. I'm where this story in a few hours is coming. Trump's golf course in Bedminster, New Jersey. And let me just set the scene for the audience. The golf course is operating full tilt. Golf carts are moving and zipping around. People are playing golf, utterly indifferent, immune to the large media contingent that is right here in front of the Trump National Golf Club. What you see behind me, you see a podium and some chairs arrayed in front of that podium. Later tonight, about 8:15 Eastern, we are told former President Trump will give a speech to a gathered group of invited guests and club members, which will also double as a fundraiser. And I'll get to the politics and our graphics of our poll numbers in just a second. But that fundraiser, I'm told by those close to the campaign, they have a target amount of about $2 million raised tonight. That's not outrageously large, but the Trump campaign believes it would be consistent with sending a signal that he is undaunted amid these criminal charges. He is unbowed, unswayed, and will make a political argument about his future, that as a candidate, he should not be in this position, that as the front runner for the Republican Party for the 2024 nomination, he should not be charged, whatever his underlying conduct is. That's one of the arguments, that all this is happening because he is the political front runner. And rhetorically, he wants to reinforce that here in Bedminster later on tonight. Now, back to the polling data that we have at CBS, conducted in a poll across the country, June 7th to June 10th. I want the audience to keep in mind two numbers, 61%. Let's bring up the first. Why is that 61% relevant? Well, that's how many people in our survey, likely Republican and caucus voters, say they now support Donald Trump. 61%. Ron DeSantis, close, sort of, at 23%. Everyone else announced far, far below. What's the other 61% I want the audience to remember? Well, let's go to the next graphic. 61% said, after hearing about the indictment, it did not change their opinion of former President Trump. Won't change, 61%. 14% said it made them feel better about former President Trump. So 75% of those likely Republican primary and caucus voters that we surveyed said it either made no difference or it improved their sense of feeling about former President Trump. 18% said they weren't sure. Only 7%, Nora, said it made them feel worse about the former president. It is a snapshot right now, a reflexive one within the Republican Party to rally around the former president.
We got some of these voters here right now.
The whole summer? We don't know yet.
We got some of these voters here right now. Look at them go. Got myself some hogwatch. Trump 2024, baby. This is the protest outside the Miami courthouse. It's all the communist fault. That guy really likes the F word. So yeah, I think he faces like a couple hundred years in jail. So that's what the scene is like. There's some more commentary.
Of the United States, former or current, has faced federal charges. CBS's Scott McFarlane was inside the courtroom, and he joins us now with new details. Scott?
Nor the proceedings continue as we speak, so let me bring in our justice reporter and producer, Rob Legary, who, like me, learned what it's like to run in Miami heat in mid-afternoon hours. As we expected, the former president's going to be released. They will not be holding him in detention in this case.
Gonna get bail.
There were release conditions discussed in court, and Rob was there for that. What are the release conditions under which the former president of the United States will be held?
Right. So, Scott, there's no limitations on his travel, international, domestic. He won't surrender his passport. What was being argued about for about the last 10 minutes was between the judge and Trump's defense attorneys over a special condition that the judge wanted to impose, limiting Trump's communication with witnesses in the case. Now, Trump's attorneys recognized, and the judge did as well, as did the Justice Department, that a lot of the witnesses in the case are employees of the former president, people who work in his security detail, at his resorts and golf clubs. And so the resolution that was created was the Justice Department will create a list at its discretion, submit it to Trump's attorneys, and they will agree that those witnesses on that list will not communicate with the former president about the facts of the case. They will still be able to communicate as they would in normal daily life, but they won't be able to talk about the case. The other condition is that he cannot talk to Walt Nauta, his co-defendant, about the facts of the case either, because they're co-defendants.
A lot going on there. Walt Nauta was traveling with the former president this weekend in campaign stops. So there's a list that'll be created and likely litigated of people with whom the former president cannot speak about this case, potentially including his employees and his close allies. The release conditions you mentioned, no limitations on his international travel or his domestic travel as he runs for the White House and the nomination in 2024. But he is free to move about without any bond, without any other restrictions.
There will be a personal surety bond, and that's just basically an unspecified dollar amount that will just be assured to make sure that any conditions of release that were just listed are agreed to.
A personal surety bond, you don't have to put money up front.
Precisely.
It's just there to ensure his compliance, to guarantee it. So there's still more to come. The helicopters are still overhead, Nora, which means the president is still inside in courtroom 13-3 here of the Ferguson Federal Court building. And one reason he's still here, his co-defendant is next up. They now must formally arraign Walt Nauta, who's sitting at the same defense table. At this moment, they appear to be halfway through.
Free Walt Nauta. An innocent man.
Scott McFarlane, thank you. It's a moment to take a look at exactly where we are, John, now that the president has been arraigned, still inside this courthouse for more than an hour and a half. Donald Trump now faces a number of legal and challenges. We haven't heard yet from Georgia. Talking about New York, here, this federal charges and potentially in Georgia.
That's right. He faces, Jack Smith is still doing work on the January 6th insurrection, and then there's from Georgia. But what happens now is his fortunes bounce through the legal system with claims and counterclaims and judges ruling. All the noise that has been pelting us here today is out of that process. And now it's whether his arguments can win the day in court. In terms of the legal battle he has before him, I think it's quite interesting that he's not allowed to talk to his co-defendant because, as we were talking earlier, you know, that's the way prosecutors work to try and create space, is if you can get the individual defendants on their own.
And so forgive me, I couldn't hear, but so are they saying that he is no longer allowed to talk to his valet?
They want to limit the witnesses that he can talk to. From what I gather from that reporting is that the prosecution is going to come up with a list, they will submit that to the court. And these are people that they do not want the former president interacting with. And of course, the big name is Nada, the valet. If he is separated from the president, will that change the status of his cooperation? Because there is a lot of pressure on him to flip against the former president.
And the pressure comes from the fact that he might serve time. Because he, according to the indictment, didn't tell the truth to investigators when they interviewed him.
And is Scott Friedrichsen still with us? Maybe you could go over just how much time, I know I've read it, how much time Walt Nauta faces if he were found guilty, because when you're staring at a sentence, it sometimes sharpens the mind and the motivation. Scott?
Yeah,
how much
Nora,
time are we talking about?
Lay out the scene. I'm sorry, Nora, could you repeat that question for me?
Yes, thank you. On the question of how much time could the Donald Trump's valet, Walt Nauta, face if convicted?
I thought she said Friedrichsen. I'm going to throw it on next time I go on, because we've reached that point.
Okay, got it. It's a difficult and fluid situation here outside the federal courthouse. I think that here in hot Miami, it's fried some of the audio wires. So let's bring it. In addition to my hair, it has fried some of the audio wires. So let's bring in Catherine Harris. And Catherine, you may know some of the time that not only Donald Trump is facing, but also his valet, Walt Nauta.
Yeah, thanks, Nora. I'm going back to the indictment. First, Walt Nauta. If he is convicted under counts 32, 33, and 34, so conspiracy to obstruct justice, withholding a document or a record, that has a maximum term of 20 years in prison and a maximum fine of $250,000. There is a lesser charge of lying to federal investigators. That's 18 U.S.C. 1001. Every single count under lying to federal investigators can bring 5 years in prison. So to say the least, there may be a lot of motivation for this aide, Walt Nauta, to cooperate with investigators, but to this point, he has refused to do so. What I would also note, based on Scott McFarland's reporting from inside the courthouse, is it sounds to me, based on my 2 decades working these kinds of cases, that Special Counsel Jack Smith has additional witnesses up his sleeve. This indictment is designed to be a criminal indictment, but also to be an explanation for the public as to why he's taken this extraordinary step to indict a former president and potential nominee for his party in 2024. But no prosecutor is going to put all their cards on the table right out of the gate. So this discussion about coming up with a list of individuals who will be off limits to the former president in the future tells me that Jack Smith has additional witnesses that we are yet to become aware of.
How does he not going to talk to his valet?
Well, Catherine, that's really interesting. And that has been alluded to, is that this indictment by no means contains all of the evidence that prosecutors have acquired. There could be much more. It's also, and I want to get this because you cover the intelligence community, there could be a specific intelligence that was not included in this document because it was made public, and so they didn't want to compromise any of the intelligence or sources or methods, correct?
Nuclear secrets.
Yeah, Nora, I'm glad you want to drill down into that. As we've been reporting here at CBS News, there are 31 counts that relate to the willful retention of national defense information, which simply means for the layperson that you have highly classified information. At one point, you had a right to have it, and then you refused to return it to its rightful owner, the U.S. government. Under those counts, there are involved 21 top secret documents, some of them at the highest levels of the U.S. intelligence community, including what's called special access programs. These are programs that are so secret because of the technology.
You see that little white band around the secret? It's got the secret and then the orange, and then there's like a little white band around it. That's how you know it's been photocopied. Uh-oh. Oopsie. That's why they have those colors in the first place.
Let's understand the smallest movements of an adversary. In all of these cases, what we're talking about with a compromise is what they describe in the intelligence community, the expectation of exceptionally grave damage to national security. So that's the big picture on this case, Nora.
Celebrating.
All right, Catherine Herridge, thank you. Let's bring in Scott Friedrichsen, a former federal prosecutor. Scott, can I get you to weigh in on that same point that Catherine was talking about? Who are these additional witnesses? What could be this additional evidence? What else is out there that we may not know about?
Well, I think Catherine is right on point. It would be naive of us to assume that what we read in the indictment is all the evidence the special counsel has amassed. I'll give you 10-to-1 odds that there's a significant number of witnesses and a large amount of evidence that the special counsel has already obtained, has put in the grand jury, and will be used at trial. What we saw was a very specifically tailored indictment. We can assume the 31 documents were probably reviewed and approved by the intelligence community to appear in the indictment. And one of the most complicated things we're going to be facing in this case is the use of classified documents, especially the kind that Catherine just described. There's a procedure for that, but that kind of document, that kind of information can't be made public. So those are going to be the subject of extensive hearings for the government to determine how it can use that information in its case. And we're going to see that in the case in addition to those 31 documents identified in the indictment.
This is the military superpower of the world, everybody. Commander-in-Chief.
All right, Scott Friedrichsen, thank you. Want to bring in Robert Costa on this same point as well. Robert, the idea that there's an additional evidence and information out there would seem to make it also politically perilous for some of these Republicans who have already gone out full bore to defend Donald Trump.
Nora, that's right. This is a fluid moment inside the Republican presidential race. I've been texting with other sources close to the rival campaigns, and they're telling me this afternoon they're all watching this very closely. Now, they're not going to come out and start speaking against former President Trump right now. They know he has a lot of support in the Republican Party, but they're starting to wonder, is this a moment where he maybe doesn't break apart politically, but does he start to show some cracks? I sat down with the Georgia governor, Brian Kemp, a conservative who's broken with Trump in some respects, and he told me yesterday that he has concern about this indictment, about Trump's conduct. He called this entire thing a distraction for the party. He said the party can't get bogged down in what's going on here. And former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has been speaking out sharply about Trump's conduct, and even former Vice President Mike Pence, who served with Trump, has questioned whether the former president follows the rule of law.
Yeah, but Mike
legally,
Pence is
this
biased.
Is going to be something that's fascinating.
The only reason Mike Pence doesn't want Trump to be elected president because Trump might try to get him hung again.
The case of a lifetime. He left his law firm. He has now come into this Donald Trump orbit to be the lead attorney in a federal case. Notable that he was not the one coming out to speak to reporters. He was the one speaking in court for Trump, saying Trump was certainly not guilty in his view. And based on my conversations with Trump's sources, this case, if it ends up with a conviction, will be appealed and appealed and appealed by the Trump side, perhaps all the way up to the Supreme Court, because ultimately the lawyers are going to argue Trump had the right, executive privilege, to have these documents. So this is going to be something that potentially lasts months, even a year or more.
Robert Costa, thank you. John Dickerson is with us on that same point. Oh, okay. Well, holler once we learn something new, if there's new information. I'll bring in John real quick on that point.
The political question is in a general election. It's not the Republican primary voter who 80% think this is politically motivated. The majority, according to the CBS poll, of the larger electorate thinks there is something here if in fact what the indictment says is true. And Republicans have to make a calculation with two other potential legal actions in the wings, the other Jack Smith investigation and Fulton County in Georgia. If a candidate who's carrying all of that baggage in a general election after having lost a general election and having influenced the 22 Senate elections is going to have the staying power to survive.
And I understand that Donald Trump has left the hearing. Let's bring in Scott McFarland, who's just outside the courthouse with new information. Scott.
Nora, this proceeding has just ended. They have completed with his co-defendant, Walter Nada. So now the former president's leaving. Stephen Portnoy of CBS News Radio was in the courtroom and was in the overflow room and heard the second part of the proceedings with Mr. Nada. Tell us what happened.
Well, the proceedings are now done for the day, Scott. They lasted about 45 minutes in total. Walt Nauta was not represented by an attorney who is here licensed in the Southern District of Florida. So the judge actually continued that arraignment for 2 more weeks. So that proceeding is now on pause. But the judge did accept the not guilty plea for Donald Trump. Donald Trump has now been released on his own recognizance on a personal surety bond. The only conditions that the judge set really had to do with any communications that he might have with people who could wind up being called as witnesses in this case. His defense attorneys made the point that so many of the witnesses might be people who are on the former president's security details, Secret Service agents, and even the president's lawyer has been suggested would be a witness in this case. So the judge is essentially allowing the two sides to discuss this matter further, but essentially the prosecutor is going, the special counsel's office is going to come together with a list of people who they say that the former president should not have any contact with about the case. What the judge accepted was the defense attorney's argument that there might be some interactions that the former president might have with witnesses. It's just a prohibition on conversations about the case.
So Walter Nada was not formally arraigned because he didn't have a local counsel of record, which is required for arraignments in the federal system. So he comes back here in a couple weeks.
He'll be, well, he doesn't necessarily have to appear, and that was something interesting. Apparently an arraignment in a case like this can occur without his presence as long as the attorney follows all the rules. That was a key point the judge made. It's possible that Walt Nauta may come back. What was so interesting to me to watch, Scott, was how the former president sat looking sullen with his arms folded at times. He was handed the bond to sign with some of the conditions that the judge had set. He pulled the pen out of his own jacket pocket, reviewed the documents, signed several times on several pages, and had to be witnessed by his attorney. It was a formality, but through it all, the former president appeared to have a frown on his face. He did not look like he was having a particularly good time. The proceedings lasted about 45 minutes, and when it was over, the judge said, the good news is my involvement in this case ends right now, and that provoked a smile.
I'll note that if Walter Nada doesn't have to appear for an arraignment, there's also no next scheduled appearance in court for the former president.
There was no reference in the proceeding today about a future appearance or hearing in this matter involving the former president. So there undoubtedly will be one, but we don't know of one at this moment.
One thing that struck me, as somebody who sat in Manhattan through the initial appearance for the former president in that prosecution and somebody who sat through this arraignment today, Trump's expression was the same. Expressionless, hunched over, saying nothing, writing nothing, making no use of the papers in front of him. But the judges had a different tenor to them. The judge in Manhattan referred to Donald Trump as Mr. Trump. This judge, Jonathan Goodman, referred to him multiple times as former President Trump, a little more reverential. What else did you notice about either Trump's demeanor or what was said in court?
Well, I think it was also interesting. He didn't actually say what his plea was. His attorney, Todd Blanche, entered it on the former president's behalf.
He didn't speak at all.
He didn't speak at all, and sat there, as I say, rather sullen, with a frown on his face, arms folded, hunched over a bit. He looked directly at the judge throughout, and it was only that one moment at the end when the judge suggested that his work here is done because the case will be handed off to District Court Judge Eileen Cannon. Trump smiled when it was clear that the magistrate judge's involvement was complete.
It sounds as if there's been no determination of where the next hearing will be either. This case is earmarked for West Palm Beach, Florida. This obviously happens in Miami. It's quite possible the next set of hearings happen in Miami, where they certainly have the size in the courthouse and the security footprint to handle everything that is here today. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of Trump supporters on the plaza. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of members of the media. I want to bring in Graham Cates, and we're going to do a little maneuvering to get him in here. Graham Cates was actually in the courtroom itself for this roughly 45-minute proceeding, this arraignment of former President Trump and this initial appearance of his co-defendant Walter Nada. Graham Cates running through the Miami street to get here. What did you see or hear in the courtroom that struck you?
You know, there was a little bit difference of a vibe. The judge referred to him as former President Trump repeatedly in his Manhattan indictment. The judge was calling him Mr. Trump. There was these kind of little differences. And then he was ordered to sign a personal surety bond that said he wouldn't commit another crime, and that he's being told not to communicate with any potential witnesses that will be listed by the prosecution about the case itself, about the facts of the case.
One thing that was mentioned earlier, I want to reaffirm, because I had left the courtroom by this point. He can travel domestically, internationally, as he runs for the White House.
Yeah, and the judge asked the special counsel about that. Do you have any issues with him traveling? And they said, no, we don't want to impose any restrictions on him for that. And they actually didn't really ask for any restrictions. It was the judge's idea to impose this one extra restriction, which is that even though so many of the potential witnesses are employees of former President Trump or involved in his everyday life, that he may not discuss with them any of the facts of the case. And they're going to get this limited list of people who from here on out, he can see, he can talk to, but just not about the case.
All right, Nora, a 45-minute proceeding that's wrapped up, but not completed. Walter Nada has to come back for arraignment, or have his arraignment soon.
Scott McFarland and Graham Cates with all that inside information and color from inside the courthouse. Want to bring in our senior White House and political correspondent, Ed O'Keefe. And Ed, so fascinating what we have learned today. I should note we are also going to watch at the same time. You can hear the motorcycles as Donald Trump's motorcade is about to depart here, and those are the helicopters. Those are media helicopters. But it is really interesting. I know you've been watching very closely what
AP's got. That's his motorcade. Oh, this is Trump. Look at the scene. There's so many people out. That's my president. We got the Blacks for Trump group there with their 2024 flags. Oh, jeez. It's the big moment, everybody. Here it comes. We got police. It must be the start of it. Not Trump. It's definitely not called it. Totally normal people things to do. What? Jobs? USA. The I love Trump. The we love Trump. The USA. Freaking out. This is kind of fun. He's like treated like a rock star. It's so bizarre. Wow, people are like, whoa, look at this shit. Look at this shit. Trying to get a picture. Holy shit, people are crazy. Trying to get that shot. Oh my god, people are losing their minds. Wow, glad we got that moment.
Get the motorcade going.
Oh, the historic game. Oh man, we're oh yeah, let's go. Look at that crowd. It's good to see. Cameraman's trying to figure out his stuff. Okay, let's go back to Talking Heads.
And
The views are actually the same. It's just when you choose to express them. The people who are defending the current president previously stated very firm views about what your obligations were to handle material like this. The chants you just heard could easily have included "Lock Her Up," which used to be the signature chant of the Trump campaign rallies, which was supposed to be the criminal charges resulting from mishandling of documents, which were less grave than what's alleged in this indictment. So the standards just aren't being applied. But the reckoning that Bob talks about has two channels. One is the legal. There are rules and norms for that. The other is political. And the rules of that are all very much up in the air. And whether that reckoning and turmoil is increased or decreased is in the hands of those in public life who have a duty to turn the temperature down instead of turning it up.
Democracy is an imperfect system, and it is messy at times. But that is the system that we have chosen here in America. Yes.
We can make it less messy, though. We don't have to make it messier.
That's right. But included in that is a free press and free speech. So thank you, Jeff Pegues, John Dickerson, Robert Costa, to all of our correspondents and guests and everyone involved in today's special coverage. And just a reminder of today's historic event, something that has never taken place in American history until now. Former President Donald Trump, now a criminal defendant in the federal court system, arraigned on 37 counts, including the willful retention of classified documents and conspiracy to obstruct. Investigators say the documents included some of the highest levels of classification that protect our nation's secrets. Our coverage will continue on CBS News, streaming your local news, and then tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Nora O'Donnell.
All right, that's it. I think that's where we're gonna jump off to. Just wanted to do a quick little stream, catch the historic event, get a little piece of that pie just to see what's going on and see the live streams. Not guilty, everybody. Trump 2024. He's gonna beat this. He's gonna beat it. All right, I might be on tomorrow morning at 9. And if not, I'll be on the next day.